So, you know, we can sit and talk about these things. You know, we can say, boy, look at all the awful things that are happening. But how do we sell that to the public? You know, how do we, you know, for example, reforestation, perhaps we can show that people can plant trees and then harvest them later and make it becomes an agricultural project or something like that.
In the anniversary of Ondoy, I helped a flood summit in Cainta. And Cainta, unfortunately, is chock full of subdivisions and squatter areas. And both the middle class and the poor build their houses right on top of creeks, right beside the river, and clog up the entire waterway, so flood will happen, and a lot of people get killed because of that. Right. So it's partly their fault also.
That was in the Marikina area, I guess, is where people were killed.
And then the problem, of course, is that the Ondoy floods was a one in 100-year event, and which will now, unfortunately, because of global heating, will happen every 10-15 years. And by not reforesting the Sierra Madre, most of the rain that falls into the Sierra Madre at that time will go down to Marikina Valley, which is a floodplain of the area.
Right. So that was one of the things that I learned also talking to Joe Reynolds, is that the actual forests in the country are down to only 2.5% of what they were
about 4%, yeah, 2.4%, yeah.
Wow.
Well, the past week there has been public relations regarding the galleon, and the galleons were used by the Spaniards when they were running this country to import-export products to Mexico, back to the Philippines. And it's not well known that the forests of Maragondon, Cavite, were cut down to build the galleons.
Oh, okay.
They were made of trees, of course, of lumber. Yeah.
Right, right.
And that's what happened. The same thing happened to Cebu. Two places where they built galleons for the Spanish
oh, so you're supplying the wood
the wood for the galleons, yeah.
But in the 60s, wasn't the Philippines also supplying a lot of wood to Japan? And
after the war, the Americans, of course, started it, cutting the trees here for export to the United States, and then the so-called tropical timber became quite a favorite for nice homes in San Marino, in the California, and unfortunately the law requires that the plantation or the timber lease agreement holders replant, but they didn't, and so they were cutting trees faster than they could grow back up.
One of the things I learned also that was shocking to me, I didn't know it. You know, even though they say, okay, you cut down one tree, you plant 2 trees. But if you don't take care of them, because there's like 140% loss. I mean, if you plant 2 trees, maybe you plant 20 trees and only 3 of them grow, or 4 of them grow, something like that.
I worked as a consultant in a timber lease agreement in Surigao del Sur. It's called Sudicor. It's owned by a family of a former political family, the Puyats. And they have managed it very well. The forest by itself will grow by itself. You don't have to worry about watering it. You don't have to worry about it not grow, because the seeds will always grow. Because, as a matter of fact, the birds, the bees, the animals, they are the ones who throw the seeds and plant it. And as long as the forest is protected and you don't allow encroachment by people and by illegal loggers, it will grow back by itself. It can take care of itself. That's what nature does.
But the problem is that the illegal loggers and everybody's coming down and cutting more and more faster than they can grow back.
Yes, unfortunately, I have come to the conclusion that the enforcement of environmental and natural resource laws here cannot be done by the government. It has to be done by the private business, the corporations, because they're the ones who are actually exploiting the resource, and if they want to continue that for quite a long time, they have to conserve. And no enforcement can make them do that. They have to decide that on their own.
Right, yeah. I think one of the things, you know, we've attended the same coffee clutch, I think, on Fridays. And one of the things that seems to recur always is we can't look to the government to do these things for us. We have to take care of ourselves.
Because the mind of the government bureaucrat is not geared to protecting, they're geared to giving permits. So you have a conflict of interest. And then, since they are geared to giving permits, they are also geared not to monitor how those permits are being used. And so what usually happens, it's the people themselves who complain about violations. It's not the government agencies that discover it on their own.
I see.
These are complaints by the people, by the indigenous peoples, by NGOs.
Okay, and NGOs, how do NGOs work with this? You actually go to the government and say, hey, we've got this problem over here, we need to enforce it, or do you actually, are you an activist in that particular area on its own?
Well, there are three ways you make your discovery of an environmental violation public. The easiest way is you go straight to the Environmental Management Bureau and file a written complaint specifying the company, the address, and the so-called violation, and request for a investigation. And that's the way it's normally done. And number two, you of course you go out of your way to look and request to be able to read all the filings of that company if they comply with the paper filings, the paper requirements. Do they have a multi-party monitoring team? Do they have an environmental compliance certificate? Those kinds of things. You have to check those also. So that's the second way. You check the compliance in law and in formal compliance by the company you're complaining about to the laws of the country. And the third way, of course, is media. You write a press release, you write a letter to the editor, or you write a press release and get your friends in media to print the story. And you try to make it as informative as possible, but at the same time to make a responsible, I wouldn't call it an accusation, but a responsible complaint.
Which would you say is the most effective of those?
Well, if you have good friends in the Environment Monitoring Bureau who can help you and understand that you're helping them enforce the law, and they help you, that's the best way. Because it's actually implemented by the enforcers themselves. But if you're not being paid attention to it, it's quite a big issue. The only avenue is the media.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, if you can yell loud enough, maybe people will listen sometimes.
Yeah.
You know. This is fascinating things to me. There's so many things we can look in the environment that I guess there's no end to it, and that's what I think we'll just keep it going in the second half of the show.
Oh yeah.
We're just about finished with the first half. We're out of time here, but I hope nobody will go away because we're going to be talking again with Roger just as soon as we come back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're talking with Roger here about environmental issues, global heating, and just about anything else that we might come up with. And Roger brought a book along that's called Science as a Contact Sport, Inside the Battle to Save the Earth's Climate. And, you know, sometimes the word environmentalist or environmentalism raises the cockles of some people, and they have really ugly things to say about them, and that's where it becomes a contact sport, I suppose. Can you tell me something about you're involved in this in your own life? Tell me about some of the contact sport of.
Well, science, of course, is different from other fields of studies. You have to do experiments. You have to make the right conclusions, and they have to be peer-reviewed by the other experts.
Right.
And so you build a consensus, and then you move from one decision to another. And that is the way science is normally done. But in politics and in public advocacy, it's different. You have a proposition and a counter position. And the public is made to believe that there are only two positions. And the public is made to believe that they should be treated equally, even though one side doesn't have as much science as behind it, except it has more public relations capability. And so that is where the contact sports comes in. When the scientists have to deal with other sectors of society, especially government officials, business, corporations, whose interests will be disadvantaged by their findings, it becomes a contact sport. And the classic case of that, of course, will be cigarette smoking, tobacco smoking. And we know for a fact that the tobacco industry lied for 30, 40 years about the harmful effects of tobacco to people. And they were able to manipulate even the Department of Health in the United States to make pronouncements, and the physicians to make pronouncements that it is not so clear if tobacco is harmful to health or not. That is the way they do it. The science is not clear, the conclusions are not clear, if something is harmful to people or not. That is always the strategy, the gambit of these people who are doing harm to the environment.
Right. You know, that's one of the really awful things. You know, when I was growing up, the advertising for cigarettes is 9 out of 10 doctors smoke. Smoke Lucky Strikes or whatever they were, and we all smoked, of course. You know, we were told. I mean, all real men smoked. You know, when I was growing up, we all wanted to be like James Dean. You know, in those days. But yeah, that went on for forever and ever.
And the other secret of smoking, tobacco and soft drinks, they have an addictive chemical in them, like nicotine. And you have an addictive chemical in a lot of soft drinks called sugar that makes people want it and crave it and wanting to keep on repeating consumption of those products.
But you know, interestingly enough, Philip Morris, who makes tobacco products, also makes lots and lots of soft drinks.
Yeah, soft drinks.
The same company, the same business handles all of them. And yeah, there are just so many of those kind of things that if you yell loud enough, you get people to listen and believe it. So that's all part of the contact sports. Yeah. You know, and sometimes environmental issues do get a bad name because you have the radicals on the environmental side who do really stupid things, you know, which then people point to them and say, hey, look at these guys, they're just crazies, you know, and that's not true either. Do you have any of that kind of problems here in the Philippines? I don't know if you have.
Well.